Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, April 2nd. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris, and the new third member of our Wednesday crew, Jed Lowrie, here to make his Rates and Barrels season debut. You were here during the winter meetings, Jed. It was great talking to you then, but we're looking forward to having you on throughout this year.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Excited to do this, and another exciting baseball season in store.
Yeah, what are you up to aside from doing this pod now that your playing career's over?
Yeah, a lot. I just got back from Japan. I was able to go for the Tokyo series and be a part of that ambassador group through the commissioner's office, and getting to do a lot of fun stuff, coaching the kids, spring baseball and softball starting up here. So yeah, trying to be a good dad and husband and stay involved in the game.
Make up for all those years you were gone.
I don't know what you're talking about. The baseball life is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, you probably have bedtime duty until the kids move out at this point.
Yeah, I'm literally walking them to school in the mornings, and trying to squeeze in some golf every once in a while too. So yeah, just going back to civilian life.
All right. Well, join the Discord if you haven't done so already. We got the link in the show description for everybody out there who wants to jump in there. We got one big news item to talk about before we dive into some of the takeaways from Jed's trip to Japan, plus a lot of bat talk. That's going to be the theme throughout the week. We warned you on Monday because that's just the direction the game is going right now. How about this, though? Jackson Merrill signs a 9-year extension with the Padres. Hard to think about anything 9 years into the future. And the Padres' future might be one of the most complicated in all of Major League Baseball right now. They've got several long-term deals already. A lot of questions, of course, about what ownership will do following the passing of Peter Seidler, whether the appetite for spending will still be there. But, I think you have to look at this, and then the snap reaction is based on what Jackson Merrill's done so far in his big league career. This seems like it could be a great deal for the Padres.
Yeah, it's a little too close to that Ronald Acuna contract where Acuna Jr. fired his agent after it. I'm a little bit worried about this one for Jackson. The nice thing is, though, he gets a $10 million signing bonus. He's set for life. And I just think he has all the skills that you need from a young player. 111, 112 mile an hour max EVs, barrel rates, a nice tiny strikeout rate. I think he'll walk a little bit more as he comes into his own. Great defense, speed. I mean, I don't really know where there's a flaw in this game, which is why I point to perhaps him making more money if he'd gone year to year. But it's also nice to ink that big number and not worry about it for a while.
Yeah, Jed, one thing that really caught my eye last year with Jackson Merrill was that he hit for really more power than he had at any point during his brief time in the minors. And thinking about some of the analysis about how wide the gap is between AAA and the big leagues right now, Merrill skipped AAA entirely. How surprising is it to see any player come up and have basically a career year as a pro in year one against big league pitching?
Yeah, no, I think it speaks to the character of the kid first and foremost, and then whoever is in his ear, if that's the Padres coaching, you obviously have to give and their development staff, you have to give them a lot of credit because here's a guy that seemingly like you said skipped AAA, but came up with a very advanced approach, and I think that I saw a post game interview of him the other day, and he's talking about not over swinging. Right. And to me, you talk to a lot of these great hitters, throughout the course of history, power develops, right? You learn how to hit and the power develops. And so, this is a guy who has clearly taken that approach to the game, and it's paid off very early. And obviously with the 9-year extension, paid off monetarily as well.
Yeah, I do think the carrying tool, and he's got more than one, but the hit tool was always the best tool Jackson Merrill had by all the scouting reports you'd read too, and kind of seeing everything come together that quickly. It makes sense when you have that as a foundation, but yeah, a lot of credit probably due throughout the organization. And he was learning a new position while doing it. Moved off the dirt to play the outfield for the first time in the big leagues. I mean, even that sometimes alone takes a really productive hitter and causes things to go sideways at the plate. So the fact that he was able to do that while playing the outfield for the first time, I think was also impressive.
General Manager AJ Preller told a funny story. It was totally an AJ story today at the press conference about how he was trying to watch Jackson Merrill incognito in 2020. And so he kind of went out into the bleachers and was trying not to have anybody see who he was. But he apparently went to a part of the bleachers where he wasn't supposed to be because there was COVID restrictions. And so a security guard was escorting him out. And on the way out, somebody's like, "Are you a scout?" And he's like, yeah. And he's like, "Oh, well, are you here to see Jackson Merrill?" He's like, "No, I'm here to see the pitcher." and apparently the guy was like, "Well, there's Jackson Merrill's dad right there." And so he ended up having like a 15-minute conversation with Jackson Merrill's dad. At the end, Jackson Merrill's dad's like, "And what was your name again?" He's like, "Oh, AJ." It's not the most covert assignment he's been on, but AJ just has, I think some of these deals have been questionable. Like we've talked about the Xander Bogaerts deal, and he has penned himself into a corner with some of these deals, and some of his aggressiveness has been hit or miss in the trade market. But his eye for talent, I mean, is just top end. I mean, they just this idea that he's going out to see the one pick that turns out to be the best pick in that draft, really, and he knows it, and he went and saw it, and I'm sure he came back and was like, "That's our guy." So kudos.
He just needs to take a page out of Theo's book now and show up in a gorilla suit.
Well, what's that story?
Oh, you guys in Boston, Theo early in his career, his star was kind of burgeoning, right? And everybody wanted a piece of him. I think there was a big crowd, and he ended up walking out of the clubhouse in a gorilla suit. So nobody could recognize him.
Bug him. All right. That would be interesting. Who's the mascot? Oh, I think it's AJ.
I'm actually surprised he didn't do that. Yeah, given that Theo kind of laid the groundwork for that, but that's a great idea. Not at all surprising that AJ Preller was there with some kind of like partial disguise, though, trying to get a look at Jackson Merrill without being spotted. Let's get to Jed's trip for the opening series in Japan. I think depending on your path into baseball, you might have different feelings about the season not opening here. So for fantasy players, it's this little nuisance to have 2 games that count that are well ahead of opening day everywhere else. So you got to get your draft in ahead of time or get a peek at the stats and deal with it. But
I heard something from a fan perspective too, which was that like they thought that opening day was kind of mismanaged, just generally, because they were like, day games on a Thursday, like, am I really good? Like, some people do take their kids out of school, but like, a lot of people, school is like number one. So you're gonna do a day game on a Thursday for opening day, and there's opening day in Japan, there's opening day here, and then there's a home opener. There's almost like there's too many opening days. There should be just like Friday night, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, every game, everybody has an opener, or Saturday day game. Everybody starts on a Saturday day game. Like, why not? Like, make sure it's sold out. We saw some opening day games that weren't sold out because it was cold and it was a day game on a Thursday. So like, I wonder, sometimes it's just how the calendar works. I know. And I'm not getting on the schedulers. Schedulers have a really hard job.
Yeah, truly. No, I mean, I think that's an interesting idea to unpack, though, because you talk about the last game of the season, they move to where everybody's first pitch is at the same time, so there's no gamesmanship in regards to that. Opening series in Tokyo, I think that I view it as a huge success. Japan has obviously really embraced Major League Baseball with the likes of Ohtani and Suzuki and Yamamoto and Imanaga and Sasaki. So the Tokyo series, I get that can be a nuisance for fantasy baseball players, but I think for the overall good of the game, I don't view that as anything but a huge success.
Yeah, I think
Fanatics made $40 million on 2 games in sales of jerseys and stuff.
I mean, the energy there was incredible. The pop-ups. I mean, Fanatics had stores seemingly on every corner. Topps had a really cool, engagement where they had a bunch of, fun cards and memorabilia, and that's one of my that's one of my hobbies too. So that was fun to see the Topps displays. Apparently, Ohtani has a big collection of his own cards. So it was. I mean, like I said, and Japan is just. Baseball crazy. So it couldn't have gone any better.
Yeah, and it seems like my thought was, yeah, it's an inconvenience for fantasy, but generally it seems like a great way to grow the game. Do the players generally like it, even though it speeds up spring training? I get the sense most players don't enjoy spring training all that much anyway. So the sooner you could get out of Arizona or Florida, the better for a lot of guys.
Yeah, I would say nobody likes spring training, but it's necessary. And so, it's a build up process. And so, you have to, take that with I guess, as you understand, as you go through it, it's not anybody's favorite part of the year, but it's a necessary part to get yourself ready for what ends up being a very long season. Japan, I'd be interested to hear the Dodgers players' perspective on this. Obviously, they did it in Korea to start the year last year. I was able to do it with the Red Sox early in my career. Actually, I was kind of on the travel squad. I wasn't on the major league roster yet, but for me, I was such a young guy, and it was a new experience in terms of Major League Baseball over there. I got to play in Japan for Team USA, but I was wide-eyed, starry. Just so as a young player, I was really excited. As a veteran player, that's a long trip to take. There's some jet lag to deal with. Major League Baseball does a great job of building in that extra time in between when you get back and when the actual season starts for you. You get a couple more off days in the season. So, I think on balance, it's something that's worthwhile.
Do you think that there's quite a different atmosphere in Japan at Japanese baseball games in terms of some of the sort of planned dances and cheers that they have? And yeah, I guess it's a little reminiscent of maybe baseball in the Dominican. There's some aspects that are the same, a little bit more respectful and not quite as jubilant and sort of in your face, but a cool upbeat atmosphere. Do you think there's any way to sort of port any of that over into America, or is that just a unique difference between us culturally? Or what did you think about when you're watching? Because you got to watch some non MLB games while you're there too, right?
Yeah. So okay. So let's unpack that a little bit. So yes, my hope would be that absolutely, right. That as you look at the Mets, right, like the Mets have their fan group that does it. The A's had the right field guys in Oakland. So there are some serious guys, fans that come up that have their chance. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's probably not as prevalent here as it is in Japan and or the Dominican. So I personally, I would love to see that take hold more. More fan groups getting more invested into the teams. You talk about songs and dances for individual players. That would be awesome. So I can't really say it any other way than hope that stuff like that continues in Major League Baseball.
I think there's sort of an authenticity thing to it. Our producer, Brian Smith, just put a note here. The Giants are supposedly adding a cheering section sometime this season. I think you have to be immersed in it. I think you have to go to a game overseas and be surrounded by people that celebrate it that way in order to just feel like, hey, let's do that here, right? I think you kind of have to get a more global perspective as a fan to feel comfortable doing something like that in a lot of cases.
Yeah, maybe they should have like a Japan series every year because one thing that the first time it happens, they may not have, cheering songs for players because they're American players or whatever. But, if they do that again, they'll have Ohtani playing cheer. I think the Dodgers should just open every year. The more that it happens, the more that Americans are seeing it on TV. It's just a little awkward not to see it live and to have it be in the middle of the night, but.
Yeah, no, I think if that would be awesome if you stood something up, the partners in Japan, encourage some fan bases or fans in Japan to create songs for the major league players in anticipation of that that opening series with whichever teams are going to be there. I think would create a pretty cool dynamic that. I think the American players, the MLB players, would treasure. Quite frankly, like if I went to Japan and showed up and the fans had created a song for me or a dance for me, I mean awesome. that's pretty memorable.
And it would start probably with Ohtani, but then
of course,
it could easily come back. So now you're in LA and they're like, oh, we heard this chant over there, like totally. Let's do it here. So
yep.
Some part of this is just like to continue doing it, even if it is hard in some ways. It's like if you keep doing it, you're going to just build a foundation there. But we know that it's a great idea because there was something like 80% of TVs in Japan were like on for the World Series. So
yeah, and you alluded to this earlier, but I was touring the Olympic Stadium in Tokyo, and right there, within earshot and eyeshot, there's a high school baseball tournament happening, and in the middle of Tokyo, and you got flags and dances, and I took a grainy video of it, but it was pretty incredible that even at the high school level, this is a big high school tournament. This is not a Tuesday. Yeah, exactly. It's not a Tuesday, high school rivalry game. It's one of the big ones, but still, I mean, the fandom there and the engagement was pretty awesome to see.
Got a World Baseball Classic coming up in 2026, so we'll get to do something like that again next spring. Did you find over the course of your career that the interest in players being a part of that grew over time? Did it become something that was more important to be a part of?
You mean like an international trip or
the World Baseball Classic specifically?
Oh, the World Baseball Classic. It
felt like it was tepid interest at first, and now I think we have more players, at least in America, especially, that want to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely grown. The interest, the quality of talent that is playing. I think particularly on the U.S. side, there's more guys who are participating. I never had the opportunity to do it, but I did get to represent Team USA at the college level, which was one of the great honors of my life to be able to put the USA name on the front of my jersey. So, I'm all for those national competitions. I think it creates rivalry and just brings us together as a community.
I mean, Ohtani versus Trout in the last World Baseball Classic, that was the best possible scripted moment you could have at the end of that game.
Couldn't these things don't write themselves, or they? Sorry, I mean, it's pretty incredible what what happened with that.
So let's talk about bats. It's been the topic of conversation in Major League Baseball around the sport for the last 96 hours or so, at least now, ever since the Yankees barrage against the Brewers over the weekend. Had a great interview yesterday with Keenan Long from Long Ball Labs, talking about the future of bats. And one thing I wanted to ask you about from the player perspective is just, what is your relationship with your bat maker or the company manufacturing your bats? How much conversation is there? How frequently are you trying to make adjustments to that? Because it seems if you made a wholesale change, if you went from like one style bat to another, if you went to a torpedo bat, you never used it before, maybe you wouldn't do that in season. That seems like a pretty massive adjustment.
Yeah, I personally, I wouldn't do it during the season. I think there's just there's a lot, unless it was one of these things where I couldn't buy a hit. But I'm still taking it to the cage and batting practice for a few weeks before it's debuting in a game, right, where something actually counts. So but I worked with Keenan at Long Ball Labs, but a lot of that testing went in the off season, and a lot of stuff, goes into that testing that leads you up to the season. So you kind of build confidence through through that process, particularly with Long Ball Labs. And then, for me as a young player, I kind of had an idea of the bat that I liked through the minor leagues. But, as you get to the major leagues and establish yourself, more avenues open, bat makers are, they're going to go out of their way to work with you, because you're kind of a walking advertisement at that point for their company. And so, I ended up working with Pete Tucci at Tucci Bats at the end of my career, and Pete and I had a great relationship, and we were able to text about anything and really dial in the type of bat that I ultimately used.
Did you learn a lot about your bats through your work with Keenan, and we talked a little bit about how your ideal bat may change over the course of your career. When you kind of come in with your best bat speed as a young batter, it may want just the biggest mass, on the barrel. And then as your bat speed is declining, maybe you'd rather have a bat that turned quicker. So when you were testing with him and finding out about the sort of variances in your bats, did you identify a couple different bats that you might use situationally, or that you'd sort of grown to like, that were within your specifications? So it wasn't like, I'm changing to a 33 or a 30, whatever. You're not changing ounces, but within your specifications found bats that were better for you in some way or another.
Yeah, I was a little stubborn on the model of bat that I used. I like I said, I spent a lot of time with Pete trying to come up with the right balance for both right and left-handed. And at the time, in my mind, it was I've got enough to manage being a switch hitter, that, I was trying to reduce the variables. And so for me, and that's also why I ended up, with the single flap or the double flap helmet, right, as opposed to two single flaps. It was just trying to reduce variability. Yeah, exactly. Like there's enough to manage without worrying about which bat I'm grabbing or which helmet I'm grabbing. So, If you
did it over again, would you change anything? Would you?
Yeah, I think
a different bat for right and left if you.
Yeah, and this is where the Torpedo bat is getting a lot of publicity right now, but there's really no silver bullet in any of this, right? I think it's more based on the characteristics of the hitter, and if I were looking back on how I hit the ball, right-handed versus left-handed, I'm probably taking a more traditional bat shape, right-handed, because I hit more balls towards the end of the bat, just because of my dominant hand being my right hand, and kind of releasing the barrel a little bit more versus staying inside the ball a little bit more left-handed. So more of my contact would be a little bit closer to the label, which is why.
A torpedo for the left-handed Jed Lowrie, left-handed, regular one for the righty.
Exactly right. Lefty torpedo.
I feel like we have to try this now. We have to get you a torpedo. We have to get out on the field. We got to get the cameras. We just got to see. We got to see how much of an impact we can have right away.
Hopefully my oblique would withstand that.
You famously stayed in one piece for your whole career, so you'd be fine.
never dealt with any injuries.
I did like Pat Murphy's quote, the Brewers manager, saying, "It ain't the wand, it's the magician," which I feel like is the right response if you get just smacked in the first series anyway, and just don't blame it on something like that anyway. Like just take your lumps and move on. But it still has to be the right fit. You still have to swing it correctly, right? It's not. I compared it on Monday. I said it's probably like being fitted for your clubs in golf. Like if it's done really well, great, you're going to hit the ball better, but there's still probably some margin for error there.
No, exactly, and I think that's where to bring it back to Keenan and all the testing that they did. I've seen a lot of things come and go through my career, and I was a little skeptical at the time, but as I went through the process and I actually saw the results, and the results matched the way I felt. I bought in, relatively quickly to it. And I think that, the process that he uses to identify the bats and the dynamics of each individual bat, which, they're coming off that's an organic material. Everything might be a little bit, different within those characteristics. So the same weight and model might come out a little bit different. And, there's a lot of anecdotes about players going through a dozen bats and, feeling them and they're going to pick 3 gamers out of the 12. What I found really fascinating is that when I shipped my bats to Keenan, they came back. I knew exactly what I was getting based on the numbers that he had produced through his process.
Your 3 gamers you would have found intuitively, usually almost always matched up with the 3 that you were like, these are the best.
Yeah, exactly. And so ultimately, it was a process that, I didn't have to, it didn't take me time and repetition to go through it. It took that during the off season, right? Where it was a more controlled environment where there wasn't anything going, or there wasn't anything serious on the line. It was more just, fact finding. And once that process was completed and I kind of knew the numbers that I was looking for that his process produced, then when I got my next, box of bats, I could just go through it and identify exactly the bat that I needed.
Yeah, the feel part of that is what's I think really impressive, but it makes sense. It's something you've done thousands and thousands of times over the course of your career. So trusting that, I think, is just something that becomes sort of innate over time.
One thing that Keenan said that I just wanted to ask about real quick, Keenan said that like one reason that the Torpedo hasn't taken off so much is that like he said that players would tell him that just even like sort of stepping up to the plate and like hitting the plate with the Torpedo bat didn't look right and didn't feel right. So like, we've had the puck knobs, we've had the axe handles and the Torpedo. Do you think that there's been any resistance just because it's like, that doesn't look right, that's not what I'm used to? I guess people have been swinging the bat. They've been swinging for so long. They're just used to, there's certain expectations of what it looks like,
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a level of comfort, right? That when you're out there and you're under the lights and you have to perform, having something that you trust is the, first and foremost thing. Right. And so, I think that when there's so much on the line, if you don't feel right, which goes back to my, the double flap helmet, right? I also not only did it like, it streamlined my day-to-day process, but I wore the single flap helmets for the first, few months of my major league career, and it just never felt right. And so ultimately that's why I ended up with the double flap helmet, is that I ultimately cared more about me feeling good in the plate and me feeling comfortable versus, just conforming because that's what everybody else does.
Is that also because you had a double flap in college because you just didn't want to have two helmets in your bag?
No. The major leagues is the only place that the single flap helmet exists. There's no other level of baseball
that's right.
outside of major leagues that doesn't wear a double flap helmet. So it's something, it's one of these like rites of passage that guys make it to the major leagues and they're like, oh, I get to wear the single flap helmet now. And so I did it too,
silly
right?
Stuff, dude. You guys are just a bunch of kids. I love it.
That's all it is. I mean, yes, absolutely. Like, I'm going to Japan with Hall of Famers and legends of the game, and it's just a bunch of big kids, and it's that's what's fun, right? Like when you never have to grow up, right, and you're able to have a successful career, that's about as good as it gets. But yeah, that's ultimately what that is. It's a rite of passage. You're bestowed the single flap helmet when you get to the major leagues.
I tell my kids that.
It's like the visors in hockey. Those rules, they go away eventually. You don't have to wear a shield or anything eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't know about that. I think I'd want to wear the shield. I could just be used to it at that point. I'd just feel better, having that little extra flap right up there. But that's I forgot about that. That's the only place the single flap even exists. Let's talk about Rafael Devers for a bit. There's something going on with Rafael Devers, right? Shoulder injuries, plural, I think is part of it. He had some shoulder stuff already, dove for a ball last July, I've seen some splits since that kind of second incident. Bat speed's way down. Obviously, we had the story throughout the spring. They had Alex Bregman, the flap about I'm the third baseman, and then he says, okay, I'll DH, I'll do whatever it takes. I don't think his struggles at the plate have anything to do with moving off of third base. That's my hypothesis. I don't think it has anything to do with that. To me, this is probably all shoulders. Like this looks like a guy who's simply not healthy at this point. Is there anything else we should be accounting for when we watch Rafael Devers struggling to the degree he has struggled through this first week?
Yeah, I'm gonna point to a couple of things. First, Rafael Devers is one of the best young hitters in the game, right? And so I think that's worth pointing out. And I think that he's going to figure out. I'm not worried about the production long term, but I think that there's a couple things. We talked about spring training earlier, right? And that players don't necessarily like it, but it's necessary. I think he had 14 at bats in spring training this year. Which, if you look at historically how many he got, it's between 40 and 50. So he's really in spring training mode still. In my mind, I watched a couple of his bats the other day too. I think there is some, psychology playing into this. I'll push back on your theory that it has nothing to do with the DH. I don't think that's the majority of it. Some of the shoulder issues still could be playing into it, which causes some minor adjustments, biomechanically that may not be obvious on a day-to-day basis, but as they grow,
let's speak to that. We do have something on that. There are some biomechanical adjustments, and the new stats at Savant can actually point these out to him. So he is way more open now. On the left, you see where he was before, and he's further away from the plate, or his center of mass is further away from the plate. You see it's 4 inches away from the plate now, and his foot is starting behind him. I mean, if you've watched him play, he's got this almost running start. It looks like he's got that stance where the front leg is really back, and you can see that foot there, and he kind of runs into it. And I wanted to ask you this, like, it almost looks like he's gearing up to get to his old bat speed. Like he feels like he has to, kind of take this momentum towards the plate, stand further away from the plate, get this dive into the plate to get his old bat speed back. So does that resonate with you? Were you ever dealing with something where you looked up and you were like, wait, I'm standing in a totally different part of the box, or like something has happened to my front leg because of the wrist thing I'm dealing with or whatever?
Absolutely. No, that is that speaks to the shoulder issues or potential injury that's not being, I don't know if disclosed is the right way, but trying to play through something, and those adjustments are happening. And like I said, I think psychologically, here's a guy who clearly, valued his participation on the other side of the ball defensively, right? And he was very, very vocal about that. Obviously the Red Sox made the choice that Alex Bregman is the better option at third base, which I think, that's not a hard position to take. But psychologically for Devers, now he's got all this time in between at bats. He's walking up to the plate 4 times, right? And when your value is now completely wrapped up in those 4 at bats and you have nothing else to think about, I think that's where, a guy like David Ortiz, who was able to really harness the psychology of designated hitter, is undervalued because it's really hard to go from somebody who's playing third base every day and having we'll call it the distraction of playing defense, right? Where you have to focus on another part of the game, to now all of your value is wrapped up into these 4 at bats. And the at bats that I saw the other day, I mean, he was falling down, swinging, practically falling down. And so I think a lot of that has to do with intent, right? I think that psychologically,
that's what he gets to do today. He has to hit a homer today.
Exactly. You got 4 opportunities to do something, and that's your value, right? So I think psychologically there's an adjustment being made. 1, 2, there could be some lingering shoulder issues. And then third, he had 14 spring training at bats, and now he's kind of jumped into the fire. So I think it's a perfect storm that he's kind of running into early in the season. Last season of my career, I think I had 9 at bats in spring training, and I've never felt so naked going into a season in my life, right? Like I was not ready. But given the lockout and the cadence of it, and when I signed, I just didn't have, I think I had 9 at bats in a major league spring training game before the season started. So, and like I said, I was not prepared.
There's a interesting aspect to what you're talking about there, where the analytics says that there's a DH penalty. There's a pinch hit penalty. Any player is 10% worse than they would be if they were playing in the field. Now, I've talked to JD Davis extensively about this, and other players about just the idea that, maybe it's about being warm. I thought about it as a physicality thing. Like, you out on the field, you're staying warm, you're staying involved. But they're already there. You hear it. Like, staying involved is not just a physical thing. It's a mental thing, and it's distraction. I love the way you put that, because if I'm sitting down there and I've just struck out, if I'm out on the field, people talk about like bring it out with you. I think that players don't really bring it out with them, because they have to concentrate on what they have to do next. So if they just struck out once and they get out on the field, they get to, where am I? What are the outs? What's the out state? Like, where do I have to cover? Like, that's the stuff that players have to think about on the field. Is like, what's next? What happens when this happens? What happens when this happens? Where do I go? Where do I throw? What do I do? So that you can't think about your strikeout the whole way. But he's just sitting on the bench. He's just like, I struck out again. Damn it. I think they need to call Ortiz, dude. I think they need to call David Ortiz, because he had the skill of being a DH, and I think it meant being top step and basically playing manager. That's what the vibe I got from him was like, he was so involved with what was happening on the field that even if he wasn't on the field, he was like mentally on the field,
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, that was part of David's process, but I've also seen, him in the clubhouse, doing other things to distract himself, right? Like there's a process that goes into psychology. It's a great idea. Obviously, David is a great resource. I think that, he probably has an open line of communication with Rafael Devers, but there's no
I'm sure I'm not the first person who thought of that. But
seems like
it would be a good idea.
Yeah, of course, right? Like, you're the same organization, Hall of Fame, like all these things, right? Like that's the perfect example of it. But ultimately, there's no substitute for actually doing it, right? You can be as prepared as you think you are, right? It's like being a parent, you can read all the books you want, but until that baby is there, you're never prepared. And so until, that's why I say there's this like transition psychologically going on with Devers, and there's other factors involved, but I do think he's going through a process right now of psychologically figuring out how to DH. And I think that there will be a recognition at some point, or hopefully there's a recognition that he doesn't have to do more now as a designated hitter than he did before, physically, right? Like, just be the same guy that you've always been with the bat. And it's just finding a way to do that psychologically when you have those 4 opportunities and really no other contribution in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and just filling that space in a different way, finding out what goes in there. Because I think you're right. Even if you're playing third base and you don't have a ball hit to you for a couple innings, you still have to be prepared for the possibility that's going to happen. If you do make a play, that probably helps you reset your brain. I struck out last time. I made a nice pick, made a nice play, started a double play, whatever. You did something that contributed, and then it allows you to reset and get past that. You're not hanging on that micro failure the same way. So yeah, maybe I was quick to dismiss the not playing defense aspect from like the psychological perspective, especially for Devers. A lot of what we talk about this time of year is focused on very, very granular data, because that's all we really have. And so much of the big picture stuff is weeks away from stabilizing or being predictive or being helpful for analysis purposes. And started putting together a list of players that are making contact closer to the front of the plate, closer toward the pitcher. I always feel like you say like up, like moving their contact point up. It's like it's a little.
Oh, you think like up like this.
So someone might think you're talking about literally up, but no, we're talking about closer to the pitcher. So you put this leaderboard together, and before the show, I think you said, don't really know if it means anything, but it's still interesting to look at these types of things because these are players that are going through pretty significant early adjustments.
Yeah, so these players, like Jake Cronenworth, is making contact with the ball 6 inches closer to the pitcher than he did last year. And that is relative to his own body. So, there are other numbers in there that are relative to the plate, but that was messed up by what we saw. Some of these players were moving up or moving back in the box, and that was changing where they were relative to the plate. But Jake Cronenworth, like relative to his center of mass, he's making a contact 6 inches further out in front. Now, for Jake Cronenworth and Ryan McMahon in particular, I actually think this is a positive because both of those guys have been guys who spray the ball around, but they do hit the ball hard enough to have more pull power. And I want to come back to this, but look real quickly at this visual from Joshua Rodriguez. He's a coach who does analytics, and he did this correlation between contact point and pull air percentage. So the further out in front, generally, it's not actually as tight as I expected, but the further out in front you make contact, the more you put it in the air to the pull side, which is generally good for power. So if we go back to this list, taking guys that have power and haven't necessarily pulled it in the past, like McMahon and Cronenworth, I'm cool with that change. I think it might be a good one. Now, I know Kowser's hurt, but guys who already pulled for power, there is the chance that they get too far out in front, which is why I didn't put coloring on this graph, because I don't know that necessarily any of this is a unqualified good or unqualified negative. But I do think that within a player, if you see a guy who has hit the ball hard but has struggled to pull it in the air, like if Ke'Bryan Hayes was on this list and had added 5 inches and was making contact 5 inches out more in front, I'd be like, oh, he might turn some of that tremendous batted ball, that bat speed and batted ball velocities into more power this year because he's doing this. So I think it's a positive for Cronenworth and for McMahon. I'm not sure it's a positive for everybody on this list. And I did want to throw it to Jed just to talk about how he managed his contact point and how he thought about his contact point. Because I went and talked to PCA, Pete Crow Armstrong, about potentially making contact out a little bit in front. And he said, yeah, like I'm in front, like I'm too early. You don't have to tell me that in a number. Like I'm feeling like I'm too early. So so you wouldn't necessarily track this number, Jed, but you would track your timing and if you felt like you were too early or too late on pitches.
Yeah, that's something that to me is the basis of all success in hitting is your contact point, right? Because you're trying to the swing is such a repetitive motion that you're trying to really find the perfect contact point for any pitch location. And once again, to our point, to my point earlier about being a silver bullet with the torpedo bat, further out front, to your point too, it doesn't mean success. It just means that you're trying to find the right leverage point for wherever that pitch is. And, I think there's still, yes, it's easy to say that pull in the air is what's going to produce the most damage. But I think intent is really what it boils down to. If you go up there with the intent of pulling it in the air every single pitch, you expose yourself to far more swing and miss that ultimately leads to less production. And so to me, it's finding the right leveraged contact point, no matter where that is, whether that's pull side, opposite field, or back up the middle. It's finding the proper contact point to produce the most amount of exit velocity and or leverage. I would describe it as leverage for you to stay behind the ball and stay through it, as opposed to it ultimately leads to exit velocity. But I think that's something that guys chase that can lead to negative what was the right word? Routines or like things that you're working on that can lead to negative results.
We talked about the biomechanics of the swing. Like you could do something where you're stepping in the bucket, kind of. You're opening up too early because you're trying to get out there so early, right? And so then you're kind of making contact in a way where it's like maybe to right field, even though you're out early or whatever, like because the way your body's moving.
Yeah. And once again, I worked on this where I would find the locations on a tee, right? And my tee work, there's a couple things that I did every day. I wanted to make sure that biomechanically I was moving to the ball, that my mechanics to the ball, my move to the ball was the same every single day. So I had these checkpoints that I would get to. And really, what I would do is I would take that strike zone, right, where you have the 9 boxes, and I would put the tee in each one of those spots, and then put it in the proper contact point, right? Inside pitch, a little further out front, outside pitch, a little further back, but in a leverage position, right? Not getting beat, but in a leverage position that would allow me to drive the pitch, right? To create some, the ideal launch angle where I can drive the ball. Yeah, it's not necessarily up in the air. It's a ball that's driven. And so if I, over the course of my career, I was able to establish the muscle memory to get to these 9 spots, right, where I could cover the entire plate without thinking about it. So then when I'm in the box, I'm being an athlete and I'm recognizing pitch out of hand, and my body intuitively moves to where my brain tells my body to go. Right. And so
you're saying that you had one movement to get to those, but are you sure you didn't have 9? movements?
No, I'm sure that's what I did. I had 9. I'm saying I had 9 swings, right, to cover the entire plate. So 9 swings in the sense that muscle memory moving to those different contact points.
It's slightly different.
But I'm not thinking about that, right? I've done it so many times in the repetitions off the tee before the game that once the ball starts moving, I'm thinking about what's my timing and am I going to swing or not, right? Like that's once the ball's in the air, it's a very athletic move, right? And if you're thinking about the mechanics of the ball, there's something missing in that. I'm not saying you can't be successful that way. It just there's something missing in that. It's very robotic, and so you're gonna create holes. And I think the way to have a long career where you're going to see, and that's, for me, I was able to kind of see the ups and downs of the pitching trends because I was consistent, right? I didn't follow the launch angle trend. I didn't follow the hit down to it. I think that we get to extremes in baseball, and it's easy to say, oh, well, we taught down so long, let's swing up, right? Why not just be neutral and just get behind the ball, get on plane with the ball, be behind it and hit through it, no matter where that is. And so that's, I tried to embody that. And I developed a routine that allowed me to have these quote unquote 9 swings that I could cover anything on the plate. And then that allowed me to step into the box and not have to worry about how I'm going to get to that pitch. I've already practiced that. My body knows how to get to these 9 spots, and I'm able to account for the situation, the pitcher I'm facing, the movement that he's exhibiting. And then I know, once I've seen where the ball starts and ends on the movement, all I'm really doing, the movement doesn't matter. I'm just getting to the spot that I've already practiced.
But, you're going to make mistakes, though, right? You're going to see a ball out and be like, that's a fastball and it's a slider. So I guess there's a higher stakes environment in some ways. If you're trying to make the contact with the ball out in front, you're trying to make the decision earlier, what pitch that is. And
of course.
If you're wrong, you're going to miss my more. But I had this weird conversation with Austin Riley once where Riley was talking about sometimes he felt like he got caught in between fastball and slider, right? And he's been a guy who's mashed sliders and actually made more of a living, I think, more of smashing sliders than fastballs. But sometimes he'll fall out of touch with that. And we talk about contact point a lot. And I said, well, wouldn't it make sense to create a swing where you're basically early on breaking balls, right? So you get the breaking ball a little bit further out in front, and you can hit those for homers. And if it's a fastball, like if you like, let's say I couldn't tell what pitch type it was, but I swung, and if I was like, I swung a little bit early, I got the slider, I got to hit it out. If it's a fastball, I'm a little bit late, and I hit an opposite field double or something, right? I said, wouldn't it then make almost sense to like time to in between those two? And he was like, no, that does not work. There's no way that you can like time to like a non-existent timing. You have to time to the fastball or the slider. You have to. Is that the sort of either anticipation or just seeing it well? Talk to me a little bit about being beat, actually.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about that, but like what happens in those moments when you think it's one thing, it's another thing? Is there an ideal contact point for when you are being beat?
Yeah, this is, this speaks to that athleticism, right? That you have to have the ability to adjust mid pitch, right? Like these micro adjustments that happen as an athlete when you're in the middle of competition and you're in the middle of moving. And so, and that's something that I was taught how to hit. Was you're timed off the fastball and you adjust to the off speed.
Yeah.
And so that's something that, and that's not something that I just blankly took to the box. I actively practiced that, right? I practiced.
What do you do if you face the Red Sox and they've just flipped it on you, and now they're throwing 50% sliders and 30% fastballs like they did last year?
Once again, I can go to sleep at night trusting my instincts and trusting my eyes and myself as an athlete. If a guy throws me a nasty slider and in a 2-strike count and I swing over the top of it, I couldn't go to sleep if I watched a strike 3 fastball go right down the middle. So the psychology of that for me was I'm going to be ready for the fastball. And if this guy thinks he's going to beat me with it, I'm ready for it in every single pitch. And I'm going to trust the work that I've put in, the eye training that I've done, the timing, the adjustment that I've done to make those adjustments mid game, right? Where I'm on time for the fastball and I'm looking for that release point so I can see the hand position and see what, and give myself the best opportunity to adjust to that pitch, whatever it is. But I'm timed for the fastball. So
it's just tough. I saw an at bat last night. Joey Cantillo was facing Manny Machado, I think, and he threw him 2 curveballs and 4 changeups.
Yep. Yeah,
he walked him. I guess Manny was looking for the fastball. He walked him. But that's the modern game too, right? Like there are times where you're trying to time to the fastball and they don't even give you one.
Yeah, no, but once again, like if I'm timed for the fastball, I'm never late on the fastball, and then I have to be in a position where I am loaded and I'm strong enough that I'm able to keep my hands back and adjust to the off speed, right? And so that's easy. That's easy to say, but a lot of work goes into that, and I think that's a lot of training that you do that allows you to be an athlete when you're hitting, as opposed to just a robot swinging at whatever pitch. And once again, like I'll say it like this, hitting is like loading the dishwasher, right? Like everybody's got their own way to do it, and it's the best way, right? But as long as the dishes get clean, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I didn't know where you were going with it at first, but
I was like, I can load a dishwasher, but I can't hit. Oh, I got it.
Yeah. So like everybody's got their own way to do it, right? And so but as long as the dishes come out clean, right? As long as you're producing, it doesn't matter how the dishes go in there.
I just feel like Hunter Pence is now on my mind as a result of that. Can you imagine Hunter Pence's dishwasher? Just a total disaster in there. But everything somehow comes out clean.
Everything squeaky clean.
Would never teach a child to load a dishwasher that way. Well, I heard something in there about eye training. We're going to save that for a future episode because we're already at a full episode for today. A lot of great stuff.
And I want to touch back on some what you're saying, what it means for hitting development. I'm still working on a piece about modern hitting development, and then we'll have some fascinating conversations about that, I think.
Yeah, tons to unpack here in the season ahead with Jed. And Jed, you don't do social media, or you do like Instagram? You don't do Bluesky?
Yeah, no, I'm on. I think I'm on Twitter too. I don't think I've ever sent a tweet before, but I am on Instagram. I am on Instagram.
What's your handle on Instagram?
I don't even know. Let me look. that shows my real level of engagement on it. I do enjoy photos and pictures. So if there is it's just Jed.Lowrie.
There you go. Find him on Instagram, Jed.Lowrie. You can find Eno on Bluesky, Sarris.bsky.social. I'm DVR.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.